Hi, I'm Jesse Dillon. This is my co-host,
Priscilla Cohen. Hi, today's conversation is with Brette Steele, Director of Prevention and National Security at the McCain Institute.
She worked as an attorney at the Department of Justice investigating people who get radicalized and recruited into extremist movements.
Brette creates programs to help people leave hate-based groups and terrorist organizations. It's an incredible session. But please first subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch this and more episodes, or
subscribe to Jesse's Office, wherever you stream your podcasts. Feel free to leave comments and reviews. We try to respond whenever we can.
come on in. Don't be afraid. Hi.
Do you have to study people who are outside of the movement to understand what people in these movements are thinking about? Is that an important part of your work?
Well, I think you need to understand all perspectives. It's really important for me to understand why people left movements so that you can understand how to reach people who are still in the movements and help them get the help they need.
Right.
And be able to share a message that will resonate for them.
Right.
And yeah, part of that is talking to people who have left and understanding why they left. And the common theme is empathy, experiencing empathy from someone or compassion from someone who they had regarded as subhuman.
Where were you on 9/11?
She wasn't born.
I was born. I was a college RA.
Right.
So I was up at University of California, Berkeley, and it was 6 a.m.
Right.
Because we were on the West Coast, and I had 12 residents knocking on my door to wake me up that morning, and they told me what happened. And for a split second, I thought it was a prank. Then one of the residents said, "Those Arabs did it," and I immediately hauled them all into my room
Yeah.
and started the conversation.
What conversation?
I started getting involved because one of my middle school teachers sent me to a workshop called Walk in My Shoes, which was a workshop put on by Orange County Human Relations Commission, and it's about perspective taking and understanding diversity, understanding implicit bias, understanding privilege, understanding all of the different things that go into living in a diverse society. And I was hooked. I got involved in their youth leadership camps, in their ambassador program. I started doing workshops on high school and middle school campuses. So I was already very engaged before I got to college.
But you know, that's an idea of, you know, how we live in a more pluralistic society, how we listen to others, how we think about different people. How do you get from there to counter-extremism?
Right. So my transition, I went to law school and ultimately ended up at the Department of Justice. I was working on a range of issues, disability regulations, the standards for counsel and death penalty cases, forensic science reform, all kinds of things. And this question came up: how do we prevent people from joining extremist movements to begin with? Rather than just looking at investigation, prosecution, how do we prevent these forms of violence before they happen? And that's what translated back to my time facilitating those workshops when I was a high school student and a college student. And it allowed me to use some of that community organizing background in the context of how do you actually build programs that are educational and that are prevention-based.
Now, to build those programs, do you have to go and sit with extremists and try and get a deeper understanding of what their behavior is?
So oftentimes I am working, for example, often with former white supremacists and with an organization called Life After Hate. In fact, I sit on their board of directors. And so that's people who have left white supremacist movements and are ultimately looking to give back to society and kind of atone for some of the harm that they've caused. And so it is understanding from them what would have worked, what resonated, why did they leave those movements, and how do we create programs that can recreate that same phenomenon to scale.
Let's start with how they get in the first place. Let's take,
Right.
So what are those things, those common traits or whatever it is?
And this is true across a range of movements, and it's true across a range of what I'm going to call antisocial outcomes. So it's not unique to violent extremism. But oftentimes youth are looking for a sense of belonging. They're looking for a sense of purpose. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. Sometimes they're alienated, they're isolated. They may have had childhood trauma. And so those factors, if you've worked in any kind of violence prevention, they're true across a range of violence prevention. It's true for human trafficking. It can be true for joining gangs. It's what reaches that youth and what resonates for that youth in that moment of vulnerability.
Did you come to that understanding by talking to somebody? Is there somebody that you remember where it really clicked for you, what the strategy would be, what a preventive strategy would be? So
I have read just about all of the research out there. So it's talking to people. We call it, it's jokingly called anecdata. If you have enough anecdotes, you start to get an understanding over time of trends, but also looking at some of the research. Pete Seamy down at Chapman University in Orange County, for example, has interviewed dozens of white supremacists about why they entered these movements and why they left, if they have in fact left. John Horgan has a psychology background and looks at the psychology of both engagement and disengagement. So understanding the research, the people who have devoted their careers to doing that type of personal history research, and also talking to individuals themselves who have been part of these movements and chosen to leave.
You said it's an interesting thing. So you could have this, there's commonalities, right? There's gangs in diverse communities here. We have gangs, ISIS or Al-Qaeda. We have a large proportion of white supremacists. Are those commonalities? Is this like a universal phenomenon, do you think? And what distinguishes these different recruitment tools?
We do definitely see some similarities. First of all, that search for identity. Who am I? Where do I belong? How can I make an impact that's greater than myself? Yes, that's relatively universal. That's called young adulthood. It's a question of what resonates for you in that moment and what you choose to latch on to. I chose to go down this path, but there are any number of other paths that you could take. You asked about recruiting. We do see some commonalities in recruiting, for example, in sex trafficking, for human trafficking, as well as international terrorism, what ISIS was doing to attract young women to come to Syria, to the foreign conflict zone, to join ISIS. So you do see commonalities in what recruiting look like. And oftentimes it is that sense of belonging, that sense of brotherhood or sisterhood, and that sense of purpose. And sometimes that ideology may come well after that sense of belonging.
Have you ever seen anybody relapse back into it, get out, and then go back in?
Getting out is a process. For many people, it's not just their beliefs, but it's also their community. It's the people they spend their times with, the people they've built their lives around. Oftentimes it can also be their employment. They may have a job that's related to it, whether it's in the white power music scene or other related fields. And it may also be part of their relationship as well. And so getting out is multi-pronged. And so you can make the decision that you want to leave, but that doesn't mean it happens tomorrow.
We have I think you told me this, not today, but earlier, but there's 300 people who were convicted during or right after 9/11 extremists, and they're getting out into American communities. And how do you prepare communities, because they've served their time and we don't know that they're rehabilitated. So how do we prepare these communities for dealing with 300 terrorists being put back into their midst?
So I don't know what the exact number is now. That number obviously changes over time as individuals are released. And one of the things that we always talk about individuals convicted of terrorism-related offenses, because we need to believe that people can change. The greatest commonality among people who have left these movements, whether international terrorism inspired or domestically terrorism inspired, is experiencing empathy from someone they regarded as an enemy, someone they thought they didn't deserve it from. And so I always try to avoid referring to people who have served their time as terrorists, because
You don't know.
we need to create that opportunity to change. But we also need to create the capacity to really support those individuals who are looking to get out of these movements in that effort. The Bureau of Prisons has several programs underway that are life skills training, job skills training, et cetera. But we also need to provide community supports for the communities that they're returning to, so
But,
that we don't recreate that cycle of isolation, alienation, and victimization.
Is there a story or an example? You say empathy. There's something that happens.
Tony McAleer was a co-founder of Life After Hate, and he tells the story of holding his daughter for the first time and really feeling like his heart had been closed off for so long, that experience of holding his daughter allowed him to open up and see the pain he was experiencing and causing, and really reopen himself. Another individual has told the story. He had a white power music shop, and the reality was he couldn't stay open selling white power music alone.
Right.
And so he had a diverse clientele coming into his shop because he was selling diverse music to stay afloat. And it was the customers who were racially diverse, who were taking the time to get to know him and ask questions, and again, show that empathy and connect with him on a human level that he hadn't ever necessarily been exposed to. Oftentimes you create that fear of other without even understanding that other that you fear.
In a pluralistic society, we have to tolerate other views that maybe never do harmonize with our views. And there are a certain amount of people who are going to go through the system and they're not going to be what we would consider rehabilitated. So, and they've served their time. So they are out of prison and they haven't committed any crimes. How do we as a society prepare for people who want to, don't think the same way we do in a totally radical way?
You mean, like, what's the line? So how...
Well, it's not a line. It's like, what do we tell these communities? Like, all these people are going to move back into these cities all across America. It's not the city themselves
there's
has
that,
to think
but then
about
there's
it.
the other idea of the freedom of thought, because
Right.
What's the... I'm saying what you're saying is interesting, because it's like you can't... Jeremiah may have a different view of the world than I do. Jeremiah,
It's
hello.
entirely
I don't know why I'm
possible.
bringing you up, but at what point does it become, my thought become a violent, and then sort of I become a part of a group, and then that group is starting to act. So, right? So we can have these ideas festering around. You can't control people's thoughts.
You can't control people's thoughts, and that's why violence is really the dividing line.
Right.
Your thoughts, no matter how angry they may be or how dark they may be, are constitutionally protected.
Yeah.
Your speech, so long as you're not directly inciting violence, is constitutionally protected. It's the violence that's not. Now, one of the things that we can do with communities is help them understand what recruitment looks like. Help them understand what that mobilization to violence looks like, and help them know what resources are available we get calls sometimes from parents who say, my son is spending all day on Daily Stormer. What do I do? Where
Right.
do I go?
Right.
And so helping
what's the answer?
all communities know what resources are available.
Right.
Right now, the answer is there are small pockets of activity in different cities around the country, in Boston, in New York, in Colorado, where I was just yesterday, that are trying to organize mental health resources,
Right.
mentoring. You know, one of the strongest protective factors from people trending toward violence is having an adult that they have a connection with, who can be a mentor to them. So organizing all of those resources, the same wraparound approach we take to gang violence, creating that capacity. And one of the things the McCain Institute is looking to do, and the program I'm building is looking to do, is create a network of all of those resources around the country so that if a mother is concerned for her son, there's a place she can go.
What are some of these other signs of recruitment? So you're worried about your child, and it could be a girl as well, right? Not just
Absolutely.
a boy. So what are some of those signs of recruitment? What might they look like?
Well, oftentimes, the people who are in the best position to recognize we're looking for behavior change over time. And it really is behavior-based, not thought-based. But the people in the best position to recognize that behavior change over time are parents and peers. They're looking for, is your child or anyone you love, are they withdrawing? Now, that can have any number of meanings. You don't want to jump to conclusions. Are they spending a lot of time on these platforms, for example, 4chan, 8chan, Gab? There's a new one every day, it seems like.
Yeah.
There are quite literally thousands out there. But what are they doing to step away from some of the more pro-social activities they were doing? I don't want to be alarmist. I don't want to jump to conclusions. Again, there can be any number of reasons why someone's behavior changes over time, but helping parents understand, if you do see your son spending all day on Daily Stormer, there are places you can go for help.
When I think about things like Al-Qaeda or, Daily Stormer or white supremacy, I don't think like, oh, well, there's an organization out there who's actually working to try and recruit these kids. And, if I take a second and I back up on that, I think like, oh, well, it must be an organization and it must be a specific task with people in it who are all charged with trying to pull young people in. How do you see these groups? Are they just loose of, like, you think, well, okay, my kid's being withdrawn, but he's just reading some stuff on the internet, but it's not that. He's actually touching something very extreme. How do you see these groups and what do they mean and what's their reach?
Well, and recruitment looks different depending on the movement, the platform, and any number of other factors. So ISIS, for example, absolutely had dedicated recruiters who were very good at that task. We see formerly known as Identity Europa, now the American Identity Movement. They will have recruiters on college campuses. I've had teachers and students actually on high school campuses here in California talk about neo-Nazi presence on their high school campuses as well. Part of it is keeping that open channel of communication with your son or daughter, with the people you love in your life, and getting an understanding of what they're looking at, what interests them broadly. It doesn't have to be about terrorism, and it can be about anything, but having that open conversation. And if you start hearing about Holocaust denial, like digging in, where did you hear that? Where is that coming from?
Right.
And really trying to get the understanding of where that's coming from and what the person you're talking to is thinking about as they think about, and then knowing that there are resources out there for you to reach to.
Do you study the groups themselves? So what are the motivations of the groups? Is it political? Is it just strength in numbers? Like, what are we trying to do here?
There is a huge diversity in the groups themselves. So it really depends. For some of the white supremacist groups in this country, they have a meme or a tagline of sorts that diversity is white genocide. And the idea is that as America becomes a country that is majority people of color, that they are in fact being replaced. And that's why you heard the chants in Charlottesville, Jews will not replace us, you will not replace us. And so for so many of these groups, it really is about fear and ensuring that there is safety for those who share their beliefs,
And it's
that they will not be challenged.
Is the idea of hate, because Jesse, you've been always so interested in, people, do you learn to hate? I mean, is hate, where does the hate come in and the vitriol and all of that and sort of the complexity of the psychology? Do you get in there and try to understand that?
For many of the former white supremacists that I've spoken with, they didn't necessarily start with hate. They started with brotherhood.
Right.
Of people, brotherhood among people who they later found to be hateful. That's one thing to realize about recruiting. A lot of times people will assume it comes from the parents or it comes from some other place. That youth who's searching for that sense of belonging, they may find that belonging and purpose and power and only later realize that it is, for example, a white supremacist or some other anti-government, for example, organization. So it doesn't always start with hate, but there is certainly a lot of hate there. The more you can dehumanize others, the more you can distance yourself from that greater shared experience, the easier it becomes to hate. And that's why reopening, creating those opportunities for compassion and empathy can reopen that dialogue.
Department of Homeland Security, and, they do all the, threat assessment. What is the long-term view? Because what we have control of as the government is a longer view about prevention. So how do you, when you're sitting in the Department of Homeland Security, what are the kinds of things that you're trying to get people to think about?
So I worked at both the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice, and both the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the FBI, they have all recognized the risks of violent white supremacy, for example, and the risks of not just organized groups, but also I call them choose your own adventures. People who find different ideologies online and kind of create their own amalgam. It has strains of anti-government and white supremacy. It has strains of white supremacy and the involuntary celibate movement. Whatever that looks like, it's recognizing that this is broader than just organized groups, and really looking at violent behavior rather than the constitutionally protected belief.
If we see violent behavior, not if we actually see it, but when you detect it, do you immediately go to it and try and deal with it? Not physically, just as one of these departments, do you start to say, well, geez, okay, we have to try and affect this group?
So, and again, it's not always groups. When there is violence, that becomes the role of the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to really investigate and then refer for prosecution to the Department of Justice. But that certainly does happen. My goal is to intervene before there's violence.
Right.
Obviously, we want to prevent as much violence as possible. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, as more individuals are finding these groups on their own, are planning their attacks on their own, more often than not now, we're seeing individuals, what I call lone actors, what some people call lone wolves,
Right.
who really are, they don't necessarily want to be alone. They want that sense of belonging, and they've searched for it online often and found people who share their beliefs, but oftentimes they're planning their attack alone. And it's much harder for traditional law enforcement tools to disrupt that type of attack because they're planning it alone, so there's not.
Have you seen an example where we've
Like an
successfully
intervention, a
intervened?
successful intervention.
Yes, absolutely. So I just wanted to, before I answer that part, the other piece that makes it harder to detect is they're using guns, knives, and vehicles, not complicated attack planning.
Right.
And so for years, the government got pretty good at informing different industry partners. If someone buys a large case of fertilizer
Sure.
and they do not work in landscaping, like that
Right.
should get you thinking.
Right.
Right? If someone buys different precursors for explosives and you're the pool supplier selling the chlorine and they don't have a pool, like that should get you thinking. But those aren't the weapons generally being used now. It's knives, it's guns, it's vehicles. And so that requires a different model for prevention.
Right.
So you asked about effective interventions. Just yesterday, I was in Colorado with the Colorado Resilience Collaborative out of the University of Denver, I believe. And they were talking about several dozen interventions that they've done just in the last couple years, where someone reaches out for help. And again, we need to create that understanding that if you reach help, you can receive help.
Right.
Because what we found is in 80% of cases, someone knew something.
Right.
Right.
And as I said earlier, the people in the best position to see that behavior change over time are parents and peers. And they're also the least likely to report to law enforcement because they don't want to get someone they care about in trouble.
Right.
So the question is, how do we get them then to seek help? Not make it about getting someone in trouble, but getting the people they care about the help they need. And so that's what the University of Denver is doing at the Colorado Resilience Collaborative, for example, and different initiatives like that around the country. Life After Hate also, they've received over 160 referrals just in the last couple years of half of them are individuals reaching out for themselves, saying, I want to leave this violent movement.
Right.
And half of them are either parents or significant others, someone who cares about them, reaching out and saying, would you please help me talk to this person that I care about?
Where were you during Charlottesville?
Charlottesville, I was in the Deputy Attorney General's office at the Department of Justice. And perhaps even more telling is where I was during Charleston.
Yeah.
During Charleston, I was in Senator Grassley's office
Right.
because his staff, actually, had asked questions. When I was in the Deputy Attorney General's office, we funded research through the National Institute of Justice. And one of the research studies was looking into far-right violence.
Right.
And the very next line describing the study said hate-motivated violence. Senator Grassley's staff was concerned that this research could be targeting the Tea Party, for example. And,
Right.
Obviously it wasn't intended to. It was intended to target hate-motivated violence.
Right.
Emphasis on violence. But we had that briefing at, I think, 6 that night, and Charleston was later that evening. And so for each of these incidents, I can remember where I was during the Boston Marathon bombing. I can remember where I was for each of them.
You're an optimist, otherwise you couldn't do the work you're doing. And, you see the images coming in across the TV, And do you feel like we're going backwards? Do you feel like,
Or
there's,
is there acceleration is what
Yeah.
it feels like anyway? And is it increasing? Is this?
So while there have been a steady stream of violent white supremacist events for at least the last 20 years, and certainly much longer, but that's the data I had at my fingertips this morning, we are seeing greater numbers of deaths with each incident as perpetrators try to one-up one another. But one of the things that gives me hope, because I am in fact an optimist, is when events happen, the community responds.
right?
Seeing the communities come together and say, this does not represent us. Seeing all of the calls that mosques got
Right.
as Christchurch was happening, saying, do you want additional security tomorrow? How can we help you feel safe?
Right.
And the interfaith response of people saying, we want Muslims to feel safe going to mosque, so all faiths are going to go to mosque this
Right.
day.
Right.
And that really gives me hope that more and more people are recognizing the challenge and coming together to address it.
In New Zealand, we had gun safety within a month.
I worry, and also, what's the line between, sort of just multiple shootings a week? It's like
Right.
we don't even think about them, but this week there were two multiple shootings. Like, is that part of the terrorism family when you think about it, or body of
So
work?
it's part of targeted violence. And targeted violence is broader than just terrorism. Terrorism or violent extremism is frequently defined as ideologically motivated violence to further a political goal. And so you are one of the reasons why terrorism has such a broad impact is because it's not just the people who were in the synagogue at Tree of Life who are impacted by that violence that day. It's Jewish communities across the country who fear going to synagogue for days, weeks, months, years after. In fact, all communities of faith in this country, between Christchurch, between Poway and Tree of Life, between the Gurdwara shooting in Oak Creek a couple years back, all communities have been affected. And that really does have the impact of terror. But targeted violence can be workplace violence. The old cliche of glowing postal, for example.
Yeah, right.
Which thankfully, it's a tribute to prevention, we don't hear about anymore.
Well, but
Right.
We see other workplace violence.
right.
But
And workplace violence is not necessarily religiously organized.
No, not at all.
So, what do you attribute that to? Like, is it the same set of hopelessness in a different outfit?
or
How
retribution, or
Well, and I was also going to say, so workplace violence, also school shootings.
yes, exactly.
And any type of active shooter incident can be a form of targeted violence. And yes, there can be some common risk factors. There have been a couple studies looking at commonalities between mass casualty attacks and ideologically motivated mass casualty attacks. I don't have that data right at my fingertips, but there are some commonalities and there are differences as well.
Are you ever afraid?
That's what I was gonna. Yeah, good question.
So, I think it's important to be vigilant, but I never want to let concerns stop me from living the life that I want to live and doing the work that I think is necessary and important.
But do you actually interview terrorists, and have you actually interacted with them?
So my experience has primarily been working with formers. I've read the research of many people who have done the direct interviews themselves. I must say I haven't personally done that.
We worked with this guy, Frank. He was an incredible guy, but I remember when we started with him, I think I was probably apprehensive
yeah,
in the
But you're
beginning,
right,
but then we grew to know him and really like him, and we did a few projects with him.
Yeah.
I forget what they all were
Yeah.
now, but we did he was great,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen him since then, I've seen him in other things, so I think he stayed on the road
Yeah,
to
he's
doing good
trying
things.
really hard. Yeah.
But do you ever, when you start these relationships, it's like they give up extremism for the opposite thing. Now they're going to help people. What's your feeling as you sit with them initially? Because you're always trying to find a deeper understanding of the way people think about things. So,
I try to understand who they are as people.
right.
Not let any label interfere with that understanding of who they are as an individual.
Yeah.
The labels of terrorists and former can both
Yeah.
have baggage associated with it. If I sit down and get to know you as a person, that's where the most effective work will happen.
Has the explosion of internet trolls and has this affected and made it easier to do cyberbullying? As this climate of unaccountability within the social media network, has that contributed to these groups? Has it made it easier for them to recruit?
It is very easy now for people who share these affinities or have these thoughts to find like-minded
Right.
people online. And it's also easy for that online space to become an echo chamber
Right.
of others who share your views.
Right.
And you think it's more all-encompassing than it may actually be because that's all you're listening to.
Right.
That's all you're engaging
Right.
with. At the same time, we've seen interventions from these social media companies that deserve acknowledgement as well. So I mentioned Life After Hate earlier. They have a program called We Counter Hate that for every tweet calling for white supremacist violence on Twitter, it can be badged as calling for white supremacist violence on Twitter. And if you retweet it, they will make a donation to Life After Hate.
Right.
And they're seeing a dramatic decrease in retweets with that simple intervention,
Right.
that simple badge. And even the original posters, 18% of them are taking down their original post.
Right.
Same, Facebook is now redirecting people who search for white supremacist content on Facebook to Life After Hate. We've also found a group called Moonshot CVE has looked at redirect to mental health resources. So people searching for the most violent terrorist content, whether that's a live stream of Christchurch or an ISIS beheading video. I believe were 115% more likely to search or to click on an ad saying, "Are you feeling lonely or are you feeling anxious?"
Right.
than the general public. And so there's an opportunity, people searching for that content recognize those needs, those unmet
Right.
needs. And there's an opportunity to try and reach those individuals and meet those needs.
It used to be looking way back, like during, the Vietnam War, you're either good or bad. And, in social media, that's really, that line has been erased. You don't necessarily know where you stand. You don't necessarily know, there aren't trusted resources. You're not going to the New
Right.
York Times, and you're not going to, I mean, I am,
You are.
but a lot of people aren't going to New York Times or Washington Post because those are fake news sites, which
Right.
is totally crazy. But beside the point, the point is that as an individual, as just a critical thinking person, very hard to discern the contours of what is true, what I should be connected to, what I shouldn't be. Does that make it harder for people who are vulnerable?
It certainly does. And I was just at a workshop this morning at the Museum of Tolerance where they're teaching media literacy
Yeah.
skills,
Yep.
which is so critically important so that you understand why content was created, whose voice is included and whose voice may be excluded from it. What are they doing to catch your attention? And what's the underlying, what's their purpose in putting it out there? And really, really encouraging you to question that as a matter of course.
Do you have a set of sites you go to for news?
I go all over the place. I listen to many podcasts.
Right.
Who do you like? What podcast?
So I listen to The Daily every morning.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I listen to several of the Vox podcasts.
Right.
They're worldly as well as They're Today Explained. Different deep dive, long form interviews
Right.
where you can get deeper than your traditional media. And then I also do a steady diet of the traditional media as well.
You don't read them, right? You listen.
I listen.
So can you share with Jesse? Are you okay sharing them?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have double vision. I listen to everything.
Really?
She can't read. Oh,
which
explain
is-
what it is. She's a
Yeah,
brilliant
so
woman, but
I can read for about 8 minutes,
Right.
and then my vision goes double. So I actually listen to
Interesting.
everything,
Interesting.
which is why podcasts are such a great media for me.
I understand. Now,
because
can
they
you-
are audio native as opposed to something that a synthesizer has made audio for me. But my computer or my phone reads everything aloud to me.
You know, do you think that somehow that has put you down this direction? How's that influenced your work?
I certainly think it has made me more aware of the ways in which we need to really be thoughtful about the
Right.
assumptions we make.
Right.
And make sure that any program we create, any intervention we make is accessible as possible to
Right.
as many people as possible.
but you really listen. I mean, because
I-
you're not
I
reading,
really do
you're listening.
listen.
So you're listening for those moments, right? Do you think
Right.
that there's a relationship there?
It certainly could. I hadn't
Yeah.
thought about it like that before,
Yeah.
but it certainly could.
Well, usually it's like Ray Charles, he can't see, so he just becomes greatest songwriter, greatest performer in the world.
Yeah.
But, well,
And Stevie Wonder.
It's some limitation, but gives you much more in other areas.
Yeah, expansiveness.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and for me, it makes my auditory recall very good. And so it allows me in a conversation to tie back to things that you've already said or
Yeah.
themes and really be able to do active listening. Because my auditory recall is quite good, I can tie back to those moments.
Do you so do you troll around on the internet? I mean, and even for your
Troll
work.
around the internet?
Well,
That's a-
is that the term? Scroll around?
I don't
No,
think
but I mean-
troll around the internet is the right term. I'm not sure, but I don't
Not
think
a
that's the
troll,
right
okay.
one. Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's because I'm thinking that some of this work that you're talking about, and maybe your colleagues are also infiltrating some of these chat rooms, or do you spend a lot of time looking at things on the internet? Can you watch videos, for example, or does it kick in also at the same?
I think it's really important to understand what's happening on these various platforms.
Yeah.
To understand, I mean, honestly, some of the language is so coded that unless you have that decoder,
Yeah.
you may not recognize
Well, what does that
what's
mean?
actually being
Well,
said.
it's written in code.
It's written with multiple parentheses, for example, to indicate that a person is Jewish.
Yeah.
Or it's written in
Yeah, it's
numbers,
A whole,
I don't know
It's a
this.
whole thing.
numbers
yeah.
to indicate words, or Rahowa for Race Holy War. I mean, unless you knew that, you might have no idea what Rahowa meant.
Certainly, the internet's changed how we look at these things, but this battle is a very old
Yes.
battle. I mean, how do you think about that, and how do you see it for the battles for the future?
Well, one of my former colleagues likes to, anytime someone says it's all the internet, he sends around an article about fax machine radicalization
Yeah, exactly.
to show
yeah.
recruitment is as old as human society.
Yeah.
Most people listening to this podcast will not know what a fax is, but me and
Okay.
Priscilla
Fair
do.
enough.
So we know what it is.
All I'm saying
Yeah.
is recruitment existed long before
Sure,
the internet and will
sure.
exist long after
Yeah.
whatever next iterations come. One of the things that I appreciated, the White House had a Presidential Innovation Fellows program that was people coming from the tech industry to do a sabbatical in government. And we had Megan Smith, the former vice president of Google, saying, we created these tools. It's our job to we created these tools that are being abused in this way. It's our job to figure out the response, and really calling on industry partners and people doing their sabbatical in government to think creatively. This is a very old problem. And it will continue in different challenges. But it doesn't stop us from needing to meet the moment where it is.
Are there common misconceptions about extremism in your mind?
Oftentimes people think it's, they'll have an image in their mind of who might be an extremist. We had someone who I worked with try and add to a press release a socioeconomic line. I said, that's not empirically supported. Like, the data doesn't actually support that. But assuming that people are coming from a lower socioeconomic status, which so often is not the case.
Right.
There is no one profile. There's a lot of assumptions that this is all mental health. And while that is certainly a component for some individuals, it isn't for everyone.
Right.
And we don't want to do anything that would stigmatize people seeking mental health treatment.
Right.
You know, a lot of times just people can be organized totally different ideologically than the way we are. And does it become a puzzle to try and understand them, to create the interventions that they might use to get them out of where they are?
You know, when I did work with trying to figure out, okay, what types of resources might be relevant, and we looked at case studies. So we looked at Dylan Roof.
Yeah.
And we kind of looked at his personal history and, okay, what resources might have been relevant? I've worked in this field for years, and a woman said vocational rehabilitation, because he couldn't hold the job.
Right.
Over time, he kept getting fired. And it's like, I didn't even know that was a
Wow.
thing.
Right.
But you need those different professions in the room to
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
you know, you may need a substance abuse counselor. It could take a variety of different forms depending on those individual needs. And so having that range of perspectives around the table, and also being thoughtful about the sequence. You can't always do everything at once.
Right.
So what will resonate most for that individual? And it really does need to be specific to the individual.
Do you think we could have helped him now had that circumstance arisen today? We would have been able to help Dylan Roof?
You're never going to be able to reach everyone, but I would like to think that if you intervene early enough, and for me, that's often before they have a plan.
Right.
That they may be stewing, they may be thinking violence is the only answer, but before they have a plan. Getting the resources for alcohol abuse, getting the resources for anger management, for example, for vocational rehabilitation.
Yeah.
Those were just some of the examples in that single case study.
Yeah.
But thinking about how do you get this individual positively re-engaged? That's different for everyone.
Yeah.
It's just like when you get burned out at work, what works for you to get you re-engaged is different
Some
from
people take
everyone
vacations,
else.
but
But how do you get the individual positively re-engaged?
the last time you were here, we talked about what's going on right here, in Orange County. It's like, how are there pockets? And you were talking about Colorado earlier. Are there pockets that you're seeing across the country, and what are the sort of biggest threats that you think about, that you worry about, that keep you up at night?
So certainly I grew up in Orange County, California. I love my home county, but it has its challenges. And so we have seen a rise in white supremacist recruiting. Many of the individuals charged with violence in Charlottesville actually came from the state of California, and that's something not a lot of people realize.
And what do you think attributes to that?
So part of it is that group dynamic, that group think, where when you have a community that has decided that violence is the only answer, And they were training to be violent in rallies. They had what they considered an alt-right fight club in the Rise Above movement. And so you then normalize that violence and you practice it so that you're ready to perpetrate it in the moment. That is a very specific type of training that we don't always see everywhere. In different places, I'm not going to go into geographic hotspots as much because really this can happen anywhere. And I think we've seen over the last several years just how diverse the locations where this can happen are, in part because it is so often those lone actors who find that inspiration, find that echo chamber online, but do that attack planning on their own. And that really can happen anywhere. What keeps me up at night are those individuals who want to prove that they're the best. It's the one-upsmanship of, okay, if the death count here was this many, I want to be that much more effective.
Right.
That's what really scares me, because when we have lone actors, it's so hard to recognize it in advance.
Right.
Using traditional law enforcement tools, we really do need the people in their lives who care about them reaching out for the help that they need in advance.
There was a recent horrible incident, and I can't remember what it was, where they decided not to name the perpetrator. And do you think that not naming and not giving them sort of this heroism or whatever they are seeking, is that a tactic that do people look into that,
So that's certainly, I think you may be thinking Jacinda Ardern, after Christchurch, said we don't want to use his name. That is certainly something, I think it requires further study. I often try not to use the names for just that reason. Because the copycat effect is real. One of the more creative social media campaigns out there, Anders Breivik was an attacker in Europe, and he committed an act of extreme violence, and people decided that they were going to make his name synonymous with dog debris. And so they did a social media campaign and said, when your dog does his business, take a photo and make sure you label the photo with his name. So that when you search, and they did all the search engine optimization and everything.
Oh my God.
When you search, that's what will come up. There are all kinds of clever.
Was that effective?
So it doesn't work anymore, but it did get people to change their thinking in the moment. And sometimes it's that intervention that can introduce that second of doubt. But honestly, we need more research. We need to understand. I certainly think it's worth further study.
Brette, thank you so much for coming in. And
come
My
back
pleasure.
and be
That
safe
was
and
great.
keep doing what you're doing.
Yes,
Incredible.
thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for watching or listening. Don't forget to subscribe. Click here for the next episode.
Here.